I used to buy new annual plants for my pots every spring without thinking about it. Then I noticed that the Amish families in Lancaster County had containers that looked incredible. And when I asked, they told me they hadn't replanted them in 6 years. 6 years, while I had been spending 40, 50, sometimes $80 every single spring on flat after flat of petunias and impatiens that were dead by October. These families had planted once and walked away. Not because they got lucky, not because they lived somewhere magical, because they understood something that the $4.5 billion annual bedding plant industry has never had a single financial incentive to tell you. Soil scientists and agricultural researchers who study traditional growing systems have now confirmed what Amish gardeners have understood for generations. Every time you dump out a container and start over, you are destroying an invisible underground ecosystem, a living biological web of mycorrhizal fungi and beneficial microorganisms that took years to build, and that makes your plants dramatically more resilient, more drought tolerant, and more productive than anything a fresh bag of potting mix could ever recreate. Stay with me through this entire list because item number 8 is going to stop you completely. There is a documented case of a daylily division that spent 3 full years sitting beside a utility trailer in a soil-free kiddie pool with no growing medium and no care whatsoever. It built its own substrate out of nothing, then overwintered through 2 brutal winters without losing a single root. And item number 1, the plant Amish homesteads have relied on as their primary container anchor for generations, performed 3 simultaneous functions in traditional gardens: ground cover, soil protector, and living mulch. Once you understand what it quietly does to a container's underground biology over time, their 6-year replanting gap will make complete scientific sense. Today, we are going to walk through 10 perennials that Amish homestead gardeners have kept in their containers undisturbed, productive, and thriving for years at a time, and show you, with real soil science, exactly why each one is a self-sustaining container powerhouse that most of the modern gardening world has been systematically trained to overlook. These are not rare plants. They are not expensive or hard to find. They are plants that have been quietly doing their job in traditional containers for generations, while the nursery industry made billions, convincing the rest of us to start from scratch every single spring.
Number 10. Creeping Jenny. The name is the first thing most people get wrong. They hear Creeping Jenny and think filler, something decorative to stuff around the edges, but the botanical name tells a completely different story. Lysamica nummularia is named directly after Lysimachus of Thrace, one of Alexander the Great's most trusted military generals. Ancient accounts record him pressing this plant's stems against a rampaging ox during a campaign until the animal settled. The Romans carried it across Europe as both medicinal ground cover and a soil stabilizer. It did not end up in Amish containers by accident. It earned its place over 2,000 years. And soil researchers have kept arriving at the same precise conclusion about mat-forming ground covers, like Creeping Jenny. The dense cascade of stems across a container's soil surface creates what scientists now call biological mulching, a living barrier that measurably reduces surface moisture evaporation compared to bare soil or bark chips. But the mechanism goes deeper than shade. As Creeping Jenny's trailing stems make contact with the soil, they root at every node through a process called adventitious rooting, actively weaving a stabilizing web that supports the mycorrhizal fungal networks already established below. University extension research confirms that living mulch systems maintain soil microbial diversity at rates no synthetic mulch can replicate. But here is the detail almost nobody mentions. The word nummularia in its scientific name means coin-shaped, and Roman field medics used those exact coin-shaped leaves pressed directly against wounds during military campaigns. The same trailing plant most people tuck into a hanging basket as an afterthought was carried across 2 continents as battlefield medicine. Traditional use was straightforward. One cutting placed at the rim of any perennial container, left to cascade downward and root wherever it touched soil. No pruning schedule, no fertilizer program, no seasonal swaps. Amish homesteaders did not treat Creeping Jenny as decoration. They stationed it at the edge as a working plant and let it run. Number 9. Hosta. For over 1,000 years, Japanese Buddhist monks cultivated hostas in the shaded courtyards of their temple gardens, not primarily for the foliage that modern gardeners prize, but for the shoots. In early spring, before almost anything else had emerged from cold soil, they harvested the young, tightly furled spears as a vegetable called urui, a first food after winter, eaten simply with miso or salt. When Dutch traders of the East India Company encountered these temple gardens in the 1780s, they documented hostas as a plant with dual value, ornamental and edible. The beauty was almost incidental. And researchers studying traditional East Asian spring vegetables kept arriving at the same conclusion. Hosta shoots contain chlorogenic acid, the same polyphenol compound found in green tea, which actively suppresses inflammatory pathways in the body. Japanese nutritional studies have confirmed measurable antioxidant activity in urui shoots. The monks were not eating them out of convenience alone. But here's what almost nobody connects. The single biggest reason hostas fail in garden beds, slug damage, essentially disappears in pots. Slugs cannot easily scale pot walls. A hosta that would be shredded to lace in the ground grows completely untouched in a pot. Most gardeners never make that realization. Traditional use was simple. One division, planted in a shaded container, watered consistently through summer, left completely undisturbed through winter. In early spring, before the leaves fully unfurled, the first shoots were harvested. Temple gardeners did not rotate or replace their hostas seasonally. They planted once in shade, divided every few years, and let the plant return.
Number 8. Daylily. In ancient China, this plant had a name that had nothing to do with its flowers. They called it Wang Yu Sao, the plant of forgetfulness. Physicians prescribed it to people carrying grief and prolonged hardship, not as a sedative, but as a nutritional intervention. The dried flowers, known as golden needles, appear in Chinese medical texts dating back over 2,000 years. When European botanists first encountered daylilies in the 1500s, they noted that across China, this plant was not cultivated in gardens. It simply appeared in fields, on roadsides, in ditches, returning year after year from soil no other plant would tolerate. And researchers studying drought-resistant perennials kept arriving at the same precise conclusion. Daylilies store concentrated carbohydrate reserves directly inside their fleshy tuberous roots, a biological survival mechanism that keeps the plant metabolically active even when completely separated from soil. Studies confirmed that detached daylily crowns retain viable cellular function for months without any growing medium whatsoever. But here is the documented case that reframes everything. A set of daylily divisions sat beside a utility trailer inside a soil-free kiddie pool for 3 full years with no growing medium and no intervention. They built their own substrate. Then they were potted up and survived 2 brutal winters without losing a single root. Traditional use was permanent restraint. One compact division planted in full sun, left entirely alone. No deadheading schedule, no seasonal replacement. The Amish did not collect named cultivars or chase bloom cycles. They planted once, occasionally harvested young spring shoots as food, divided every few years, and let the container do the rest. Number 7. Coreopsis. Before European contact, Seminole and Cherokee communities across the American Southeast used Coreopsis flowers to produce a brilliant flame orange dye for their ceremonial textiles and woven baskets. They did not cultivate it. They did not need to. It returned every year exactly where they left it. And researchers studying native plant pigments kept arriving at the same conclusion. The compound behind Coreopsis's flame orange color, a flavonoid called ocanin, demonstrates measurable anti-inflammatory activity in laboratory analysis. The same pigment Seminole weavers extracted for ceremonial dye has been formally identified as a bioactive antioxidant. The color was never purely decorative. But here is what almost no one understands. Coreopsis blooms more prolifically in poor, lean soil than in rich, heavily fertilized containers. Excess nitrogen triggers lush foliage at the direct expense of flowers. The nursery industry sells you fertilizer. The plant rewards you for not using it. Traditional use was deliberate restraint, one compact variety planted in lean, well-draining soil with nothing added, no fertilizer, no deadheading schedule. Native growers and Amish homesteaders understood that Coreopsis performs best when left completely alone. They withheld what modern gardeners habitually give, and the plant answered with months of uninterrupted bloom.
Number 6. Salvia. And this one is different. There is a sentence that survived every plague and every famine in European history. Medieval physicians inscribed it in their manuscripts. Why should a man die who has sage growing in his garden? They were not speaking poetically. They were reporting what they directly observed. And here is the precise biochemical reason why. Salvia contains rosmarinic acid, a compound that inhibits prostaglandin synthesis through essentially the same biological pathway as modern anti-inflammatory medications. The European Medicines Agency has formally recognized sage as a clinically valid traditional medicine. The physicians writing those manuscripts were not guessing. But here is the detail that reframes everything. The English word sage, meaning a wise and learned person, comes from the exact same Latin root as salvia. The plant was not named after wise people. Wise people were named after the plant. To know sage was, historically, the definition of wisdom. Traditional use was a simple placement. One container in full sun near the kitchen door, lean soil, minimal water. Amish homesteaders did not extract compounds or buy supplements. They pinched fresh leaves directly into broths, dried bundles for winter, and let the same plant rebloom for years without replacement. Number 5. Prairie Blazing Star. When Lakota communities faced winter shortages on the American plains, they dug the underground corms of liatris from frozen ground and ate them as survival food. Lewis and Clark documented this plant during their 1804 expedition specifically because every tribe they encountered treated it as an essential resource. And researchers studying Native American food plants kept arriving at the same conclusion. Liatris corms contain significant concentrations of inulin, the same prebiotic fiber now actively studied by nutritional scientists as a therapeutic compound for gut health. The Lakota were not eating survival food. They were eating medicine. But here is what genuinely surprises botanists. Prairie Blazing Star blooms from the top of its spike downward, the opposite of virtually every other flowering plant on Earth. Most blooms open from the bottom up. Liatris opens crown first. No one fully understands why. It simply has always done it that way. Traditional use was a single deliberate act. Plant the corm in full sun, lean soil, and walk away. No feeding, no winter protection. Plains communities did not cultivate liatris. They returned to the same patches each year, knowing the corms would be deeper and more productive every season. Number 4. Coral bells. Before it became a garden center staple sold purely for foliage color, Cherokee healers knew Fuchsia by a different name entirely, alum root. They dried and powdered the root, pressing it directly against wounds to stop bleeding. The tannin concentration was high enough to function as emergency wound treatment in the field. And researchers studying Native American wound treatments kept arriving at the same conclusion. Fuchsia root contains galanic acid tannins, compounds that bind directly to wound proteins, physically contracting tissue and blocking bacterial infiltration. The FDA formally classifies tannins as Category 1 skin protectants. The Cherokee were using pharmaceutical-grade wound chemistry. But here is what the garden industry quietly erased. This plant was known as alum root for centuries, a medicinal name that told you exactly what it did. The industry rebranded it coral bells to sell it as decoration. The medicinal history was not forgotten. It was marketed away. Traditional use was permanent placement. One division in a shaded container, watered consistently, divided every few years at zero cost. Cherokee healers and Amish homesteaders did not chase new cultivars each season. They kept the same alum root for generations, medicinal root intact, and used every part of it. Number 3. Wild geranium.
For nearly a century, from 1820 to 1916, wild geranium root was listed as an official medicine in the United States Pharmacopoeia. Not as a folk remedy, not as a traditional practice, as a formally recognized pharmaceutical. Then synthetic alternatives arrived, and it disappeared from the record entirely. And researchers revisiting 19th century botanical medicines kept arriving at the same conclusion. Wild geranium root contains geraniin, a specific L-tannin with documented antimicrobial activity against a broad spectrum of pathogens. The root's tannin concentration can reach 30%, among the highest recorded in any North American medicinal plant. Traditional use was simple. One division planted in a shaded container with rich, moist soil, left entirely undisturbed until the root system matured. Amish homesteaders did not purchase supplements. They harvested small root portions in autumn, dried them, and stored them through winter. The container did the compounding work.
Number 2. Ornamental grasses. In the 1930s, American farmers plowed under millions of acres of native perennial grasses across the Great Plains. Permanent root systems, some reaching 15 feet deep, had held that soil in place for centuries. Without them, the topsoil became dust. We called it the Dust Bowl. And USDA soil researchers kept arriving at the same precise conclusion. Perennial grass roots produce glomalin, a glycoprotein that physically binds soil particles together. Without undisturbed root systems generating it continuously, soil structure collapses. USDA soil scientists only formally identified glomalin in 1996. The Dust Bowl had already demonstrated it 60 years earlier. But here is what reframes every ornamental grass in your container. The root system of a mature perennial grass contains more biological mass than anything growing above the soil line. What you see waving in the breeze is the smaller half of the plant. The real structure is underground. Traditional use was elemental. One compact variety in any container, cut to 4 inches once each spring, then left entirely alone. Amish homesteaders did not deadhead, fertilize, or rotate their grasses seasonally. They made one 5-minute cut per year and let the permanent root system do the rest for decades. Number 1. Sedum. There's a reason this plant appears in traditional records across more than 40 distinct cultures spanning 3 continents. Viking longhouse builders packed it onto living rooftops across Scandinavia for over 1,000 years, simultaneously as insulation, soil binder, and moisture regulator. 3 functions, 1 permanent plant. And researchers studying drought-resistant plant biology kept arriving at the same precise conclusion. Sedum operates through a specialized process called CAM photosynthesis, opening its stomata exclusively at night, reducing moisture loss by up to 10 times compared to conventional plants. The Viking builders were not choosing sedum for aesthetics, they were engineering with it. But here is the consumer warning nobody gives you. The sedum sold at most garden centers has been specifically bred away from the traits that made Viking builders choose it. The original species, Sedum acre, biting stonecrop, is rarely sold commercially. The industry domesticated the survival mechanism out of it. Traditional use was deliberate sourcing followed by deliberate neglect. Seek out Sedum acre from a specialty nursery, not the commercial hybrid varieties. Plant in lean, near-gravel soil with no fertilizer and minimal water. Viking builders did not tend their rooftop sedum. They placed it once and walked away for decades. Here is what strikes me most about this entire list. Not a single one of these plants required a laboratory, a patent, or a corporation to discover. CAM photosynthesis, glomalin, gallic acid tannins, prebiotic inulin. Every mechanism we walk through today was identified through generations of patient, direct observation, long before science had language for any of it. The Amish families in Lancaster County are not gardening the way they do out of stubbornness or tradition for its own sake. They built permanent systems around what they directly observed over generations. That should make you think differently about what you are spending money on every spring. So here is the challenge. Pick 2 plants from this list, just 2.
Source the best quality variety you can find, not the first thing at the garden center. Plant them in a permanent container. Leave them alone for 30 days and pay attention, the way the Amish pay attention, to what comes back. If this video opened something up for you, drop a comment and tell me which plant stopped you completely. Was it the daylily that built its own soil inside a kiddie pool? The wild geranium that fires seeds 30 feet like a catapult? Or alum root, quietly renamed by the industry? I read every single comment. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that button now and ring the notification bell. The next video goes deeper into exactly how Amish families prepare these same containers for winter, a zero-cost method that loses almost no plants to frost. You do not want to miss it. See you there.